Lee Jones here from Hotspawn, and I'm with Fnatic's head coach Milan after a win against Team Vitality, which, for the record, that could be any time in the last few years because you seem to beat them every time. So I guess just first of all, the obvious one, just, yeah, what are your thoughts coming off of the win, and why is it, do you think, that you just will always beat Vitality?
Um, I feel good, obviously. Your second question is very intriguing. Why do I think we always win? I do think that there's like some element of like mental game that's starting to sneak in, and that becomes exponentially more frustrating for them, right? Like it's a very different core, but even like recently, this many of these players haven't really been able to beat us. So I think that kind of parts into it, and then obviously the history that the core of players, at least with of the Vitality squad, has with Fnatic. I think that all plays in. Um, but mostly, I just think we were better today. Like I think that that's really what it comes down to. I think Vitality looked really good today and this whole season. But yeah, I think we were just the better team today. I think we showed up when it really mattered.
hmm How does the history, like with the players, change the prep, if at all? Like just the fact that obviously, Boaster and Alpha especially have spent so long playing with Durka and
Yeah.
Chronicle. Does that change things a little bit?
So, truth be told, we didn't prepare a whole lot for this game because I think with all the meta changes and everything, there's not like a lot of things that we do to before the game set the boys up, but they understand their like tendencies, right? And I think the biggest like the biggest thing today is just individual habits that players have, right? And I think there was a couple rounds today that we win or that they might win off of recognizing what the most likely move is of the opposite player, right? And I think that's kind of where this history of playing together comes. There's one really good example on Breeze. I think Jake talked about it in the post plan as well, but it's like it's a 1v2 against Kron and Durka, and in the 1v1 he takes half of the bomb, he taps it, and then he sticks it. So he just sticks two halves instantly, basically.
hmm
And that's something that when you are like a teammate of someone for such a long time, you kind of know their habits around the spike. And Jake said it in the moment. He said, I'm just gonna stick it, and he's not gonna peek me." And I think that shows kind of like the mental um, warfare or the mental element that comes with, your ex-teammates. They have seen you do the same moves thousands of times, and then when you do something slightly different in official, that's kind of the difference maker.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I wanted to ask you about just the adaptation this year for you guys, especially with the meta changes and like the util nerfs and things. Obviously, Fnatic was like famous for playing pretty slow and being methodical, and then more recently you've got like Nongshim being the best team in the world, just sliding in with shotguns non-stop, which seems quite the opposite to what you guys were used to. And I was reading an interview that Bosa did last week, I think, with Sheep Esports, where he was even saying like as an IGL he's even doing a bit less sort of tactical prep and is focusing more on kind of just his own skills, just seeing as it just seems more of a mechanical kind of focus right now. So yeah, just maybe explain what that process is like for you guys. Just how are you finding adjusting to those kind of big changes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've tried a lot, right? Like I think to very briefly touch on kickoff itself, we kind of chose a direction and we just missed the mark. And I took accountability for that, like with the boys. And like I think we just as a coaching staff with Jake included, we just missed the mark. We had a bad read on the meta, and then when we came back, we really quickly pivoted into double duelist, and we had Alpha and Kayak playing Neon Yoro on every map. And then they've been consistently making changes ever since. That kind of like almost feels like it forces you away from that. But at least we now know that we have these like different kinds of rounds in our arsenal, right? And I think today on both attack sides we showed really good variance in terms of like attacking speed, being able to play slower rounds, faking, but also going straight with or without ults. And I think that's kind of something that we were forced to do a little bit, but it ultimately it really suits us now. And I think when Jake's talking about more focusing on like the mechanical element, that's also where like Casper, our assistant coach, or like just our other coach comes into play. Because he takes a lot of load off of Jake, being able to help with the strategy side of things, and that's also where Jake is able to focus that little bit of extra energy on just being the best individual player that he can be. And I think that's also making a big difference because, yeah, he had a phenomenal game today.
Yeah, I was going to say I think he was the highest rated player today across
Yeah.
across both maps. So definitely working. I wanted to ask. Obviously, there's recently been some massive news for VCT as a whole, and I wanted to kind of pick your brains a little bit and just to kind of see what your thoughts were on there. There was a whole load of things, obviously about the open qualifiers and potentially more lands and not having to be in Berlin the whole time. All these different things. So, just maybe were there any highlights for you, or any kind of immediate thoughts on it?
I mean, there's a lot of thoughts, right? Like we're moving closer to models that are more used in other games, right? And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. And having people less in the same environment physically is definitely put like there's so many potentials, right? And I think that's like the big thing for me. And to give the boring answer, I don't really think about it much now, right? Like I'm really focused on what's ahead of us in the close future, and I think we're doing a really good job now. And ultimately, that's all I really care about. And the future and whatever Fnatic or VCT as a whole is going to do next year, it concerns me because it's obviously like important, but it doesn't concern me as much as what we're doing in this moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just if you were allowed to be selfish, let's say that Sam Matthews says Milan, you get to choose where our team's based. If it doesn't have to be in Berlin anymore, where would you have it?
Oh, but this is just hypothetical, right? So I think Spain would be pretty nice. I think Spain, like, but this is kind of like the question, right? This is, hey, are we going to have a team permanently on site? Are you bringing people to boot camps where they can be based in their like own countries and whatnot, right? But I think just in terms of like, hey, where would I like to go every now and then to have, the boys practice together? I think Spain's really nice. The good weather, good food, pretty relatively cheap. So I think it would be a nice option.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to ask also about Beckage and kind of his settling in with the team, because I guess I was kind of thinking about it. And I would imagine a team like Fnatic is maybe one of the nicer ones to be like a new player, especially when you're the one roster change. Like it just seems like everyone's so tight knit, and yeah, like a whole kind of family atmosphere. So I imagine being the one new player is maybe a bit less pressure in that, and very welcoming. But then where you say that there's been a lot of like iterating in terms of play style and things, I imagine that can maybe make things a little bit more difficult to sort of find your spot. So just how have you found Beckage joining and that whole process of bedding him in, but also sort of finding his place in the team as well?
It's been really smooth, and I think that's very largely on himself as well, right? Like obviously we know that we are one of the best teams in terms of like vibes and energy and like our collectiveness, and that makes integration generally easy. But also he's just been really like a gem to work with, very eager to learn, very reflective. He picks up things, he remembers things, so he makes it easy for us as well. And I think that's kind of what I think if you look at any player that Fnatic has picked up in recent years, I don't think there are many players that underperformed compared to what people would have expected, beforehand. And I think that is largely on the combination of good scouting, but also just having a good environment that allows people to thrive relatively easily. And, meta changes or structural changes, everybody adjusts to those at the same time. And I think that's kind of just a given for any team. And I don't think we are doing anything crazy special there.
Just one more question. I was also in this interview I saw with Boaster recently. He kind of got asked one of the questions that gets asked to everyone all the time, and especially when you're a team like Fnatic that's going for titles. Of what are the other teams you'd be thinking about? And he said kind of the obvious ones like BBL, Gentlemates that were the top two, and then Vitality and Liquid. But that was after that game against Eternal Fire. That especially those first two maps were like extremely close. When no one had kind of expected them to really put up much fight. They've obviously just gone now and beaten BBL as well. Just what are your thoughts on them as a team? Do you think they're a bit of a dark horse, maybe?
For sure. But I think there's always going to be there's some teams that are just each other's kryptonite. And I think Turkish teams, they just butt it out. Like I was watching the game yesterday and there was some crazy stuff going on. So it's like those matches feel so 50-50 often that any team can come out. And if BBL win 2-0, we're probably having an entirely different discussion, and that's 2-3 rounds that both teams maybe win here and there that they shouldn't win, and vice versa. But yeah, no, Eternal Fire, I think they looked good against us, given the fact that they had very little prep, and now with a week of practice, they're able to take down a BBL. I do think stylistically that's going to be a really good matchup for them, and I'm not entirely sure. Do they have Vitality next week? Do
Oh, I'm
you
not sure.
happen to know? Okay, well, but I think obviously they still have Giants to go. They do, so I think that's going to be a really good measurement for both of these teams, honestly, because I think for Vitality, right, you get beaten 2-0 in a game that you probably expect to win after the first week, because I would say they looked better in the first week than we did. And Eternal Fire is ramping up, so it's two teams that are kind of going in like opposite trajectories, and they get to meet each other in this very interesting time. So I think that's going to be a very fun like tell for the rest of the split.
Nice. Yep. Good advert for VCT EMEA for next week.
There we go.
Nice one.
It's $50 in my checking account right there.
Tell Riot that's not on me, mate. I'm not fussed. But there we go. But yeah, thanks for your time, Milan. That's what we've got time for. And yeah, congrats on the win today, and good luck in the rest of stage 1.
All right. Thank you, Lee.
Thanks very much.